Let me permit me to welcome all of you to the World Sports Tourism Day conversation. The World Sports Tourism Day is a day set aside to celebrate all that sport and tourism do for each other and how their marriage um, improves the socioeconomic lots of the human world. So basically, today we are celebrating how much sports contributes to the global travel trade. We are celebrating how tourism and travel aids sport in the 21st century definition. So that's why we're here. Basically, we are here this is not so much of a conference, it's a conversation. We are basically having conversation, just that we have a few thought leaders who will be leading the conversation. So basically, we are here to have a conversation, and our topic is basically sports tourism strategy and execution. Can there be a global approach? So let me welcome Professor Seth Kirby, right? Hello.
Hello. Hi, how are you? How are you all?
I'm well. I'm well. And
Yeah.
Fabian from Spain, Seth Kirby, Professor Seth Kirby from the United Kingdom, right?
Yeah, Nottingham Trent University in the UK.
Fantastic. And Antonio Caval from, I think, Estonia. Well, okay, I guess he has muted his speaker. So, and Anita Nana. So basically, we're here to have a conversation like I mentioned earlier. And I would like to start with Professor Seth Kirby. I would like you to do a brief introduction of yourself and dig right into the topic of the day.
Okay, yeah, sure. My name's Seth, and I'm an academic from Nottingham Trent University in the UK. My research areas tend to be focused around mega sporting events, but I'm also interested in areas around sports marketing and around particularly small business and the impacts that events and tourism can have on those businesses. I think, yeah, from some of the perspectives that we're going to talk about today, I think sports tourism has the ability to contribute enormous benefits to local populations if it's done in and managed in the right way. So having local participation of the populations, thinking about some of the key areas and key themes, particularly for cities, things such as accessibility and people having access to various services. As well as that, I think that tourism that's linked to whether it be sports or events themselves has the ability to give visitors access to new experiences. And I think when you incorporate that into plans for sporting activity or new sports, it can be really beneficial for not only local populations, but also for international visitors as well. So I think that would be a good place to sort of kickstart the conversation. I don't know whether anybody else wants to contribute at this stage.
Okay, that's a great thought actually. Fabian, what do you think about what Professor just said?
Well, I'm glad to be here. I'm really happy to share with you all of my thoughts about the sport tourism. I think that what Professor said is quite interesting. Overall, not because it is a great impact in major sports. I'm particularly sustainability around the mobility of people and resources, and the possibility of to be very and the first point of from a first expression, from a first approach, I just want to remark the possibility that or the need cultural tourism in the territory, how we can track employment, and how we can also reinforce indigenous values. I would say indigenous, the proper values for the territory, and also to be open for the outside influence of our society. So I just only see opportunities. I just only see the idea of being more competitive as long as we can chat together and work together for development plans.
Awesome. Now to Paulo, same thought line. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with both. And the vitamin too. And one I would call a mass media mega events, and then we're talking about events such as Olympic Games and FIFA World Championships, and more the mass participation events. And the mass participation events are probably more what Fabian is talking about. When we talk about the mass media, we're talking about events that need 8 years planning. They should have a long-term strategy behind it. They should invest on a legacy. Usually these type of events are events that countries, when they decide to host them, are betting on infrastructures. Sometimes it can be roads, stadiums, even transportation, even housing can be included in the strategy and the plan. And I think that the region that really wants to use sports as a tourism product should have a plan and a strategy for it. And the event cannot be too big for the region. So it's essentially that the event fits the region, that the region fits the event. I think that sport has the ability to promote a destination, but the destination also has the ability and to promote the event. So they both go hand in hand. And I think that the dimension of the event and the goal behind it needs to be taken in consideration from the beginning.
Now, quick one. What do you mean by the event cannot be bigger than the destination, and the destination cannot be bigger than the event?
Sure, absolutely. I'll give you an example. We do some mass participation events, and we've had to refuse certain regions that wanted to host the event simply because they didn't have the infrastructures for it. And basic infrastructures, such as hotels, for example, such as restaurants, such as supermarkets, basic stuff that you need to have it. The development of a region to receive an event needs to go hand in hand with the development of the event itself. You either have a big plan for a long term, and then you're betting on infrastructures, and we're talking about Olympic Games, for example, and you need to have a long-term plan and legacy for the post-event, and then you build the structures before the event, but you have the plan to follow up on it. Or when we're talking about mass participation, such as what Fabian was talking about, sometimes a region is not ready for an event of the size that we would like to do. And we either downsize the event, or it's just not maybe not the best fit for the event. At the end of the day, when we talk about mass participation and a long legacy, we should look at multiple year contract events. For a smaller region and for a smaller size event, such as a marathon, for example, or a triathlon event, for example, or a cycling event, it should be multiple year contracts. The result will come. It needs to build, and the region and the event can grow with the destination. So that's what I mean. Sometimes the infrastructure is just not there. We had in some cases destinations that really wanted us to go there, but for the product that we had, it was just overwhelming for the region.
You want to dig in, Professor?
Yeah, just to pick up on it and a few of the points that Fabian and Paulo have raised, I think going back to what Fabian was talking about in terms of the sustainability of the places that are there, I would say it doesn't necessarily need to have a large-scale sport that's going to be there. So some of the work that I've done around small-scale events and festivals, particularly things if you take food and drink, small-scale activities around these sporting events, doesn't necessarily have to be mass-scale events. So these can be done very much driven from the locals that are there, and that's where events tend to be more effective when you've got participation of the locals. They're going to benefit in some way, whether they're going to get some financial resources or some ability to build relationships and network with those people, or in the fact that they know they're guaranteed to get trade at these events. And I think that is a real struggle for the larger scale of events. So if you take the Olympic Games, and I'd argue that there are places where Olympic Games have happened where they didn't have the infrastructure and resources there in the first place. So if you take the context of developing nations, Brazil's, Russia's, India's, you could argue that they don't necessarily have the infrastructure to host that event in the first place. And particularly if you're acquiring transportation to those areas, you're acquiring facilities that you just don't possess. So in some cases, that will be a strategy for why a local authority or an organising committee will say, well, actually, we want this event to come to this destination. And this is primarily the case for places like Turkey that keep bidding for these scale of events because they want to generate this additional tourism, which in some case doesn't necessarily happen. And the primary case where it has happened is Barcelona. And any other major sporting event that's been held, they haven't been able to generate those additional visitors as a result. Rio de Janeiro was targeting to become one of the top places in the world to be visited, and it just didn't materialize. But that's not because the events, it's because they didn't tap into their strategy, and actually didn't really have a framework that was going to help them build that tourism long term. So I would say that it's just as beneficial for a place to think about, well, what local events can we have here that may not have the major economic impact, but are going to be a benefit to those local populations, because these larger scale events tend to push out local businesses, and that's what my research points towards anyway. So I think it's important to think about the overarching sustainability of those events as well. And the argument is, well, are mega sporting events going to be that sustainable if you're going to have millions of people traveling to that destination via aeroplane. So it's in that argument, well, how can they be considered to be environmentally sustainable, and how are they supporting what's there already for the locals in place? So local events, more frequent local events, can be just as beneficial, I would say.
Thank you very much, Professor. I think every one of us are in agreement. We're in agreement that there is a place for sports tourism in the inclusiveness that United Nations World Tourism Organization is preaching. So there has to be the trickle down effect of tourism, even in sports, in sporting events and holiday, cannot be oversold. You agree, right? Thank you very much. Now,